I've made it my mission to put frills on absolutely any accessory that I can think of, and this is the headband version. So it's called the hothead hairband. It's a complete crochet tutorial that I'm going to share with you today. This pattern was originally published in the Q3 2024 issue of Material Girls, which is a free fiber art magazine that you can download at the link in the description. This always includes free crochet, sewing, knitting patterns, as well as fun fiber art games, craft tutorials. I love putting these out, and you should definitely check it out. To make this, you'll need some worsted weight yarn. I'm using Focalana's Arwetta held double with Focalana Tilia just to give it a little bit of fuzz, but you don't need to hold double. This is a 3.5mm needle, and that's all we need to get going. You can use one color of yarn or multiple. I'm going to go with two and start it out with what I want the body of my headband to be made out of. We're going to begin by crocheting just a basic band, and then we'll increase a lot at the end, which is going to make those stitches ruffle up nice on the edge. Start by making a slip knot, inserting your hook, and we're going to chain 100 chains to start out. So all you do to chain is to take your working yarn over your hook and pull it through that loop. Super easy. Gonna do that 100 times. Try not to lose count. It's gonna get long really quickly. Once you've reached 100, just chain once more, and then we're going to turn back around to start on our first row. This is a single crochet row, but we're going to go through the back loop only. So I'll show you what this looks like here. Usually when you crochet, you go under 2 loops, but I'm just going under 1, and it's the one on the back of the crochet stitch. So I'm going to go through that, pull up a loop, wrap around, and then pull through 2 loops. So it's just a basic single crochet stitch, but I'm only going through that back loop instead of under 2 of them. This creates a nice ridge on our hairband. Continue doing this across the entire row, and you'll start to see the first row build up. When you get to the last stitch on this row, you can have the option to change colors here. So I'm going to change to a dark pink to make the middle ridge in our hairband. So instead of pulling through, doing the last move of the single crochet through these last 2 loops here, I'm going to cut my yarn, grab the next color that I want, and wrap that around my hook, and then pull it through both of these loops, and that is going to make a seamless color transition. Chain 1 with that new color, turn your piece around, and we're going to begin on row 2. This is a slip stitch row, but we're only going to go through the front loop. So last time it was the back loop, now it's the front loop. You can see that I'm taking my hook underneath just that front loop. I'm going to slip stitch by pulling some yarn around and then up directly through the loop that's already on my hook. So it has one less step than a regular single crochet. Again, I'm going up through the front loop, pulling yarn up directly through the stitch that is already on my hook. Continue doing that across the entire row, and you'll start to be able to see which is the front and back of the headband. So here we have a nice line lined up, and then on the back you'll see that the colors kind of overlap. That's how you know it's the back. At the end of this row we have another chance to change colors. I'm going to change back to the light pink that I want for the body of my headband. So I'm cutting my yarn here, grabbing that lighter pink, putting it over my hook, and then pulling it up through that last loop. From here, chain 1 and turn your work around. We're going to begin on row 3. This is a single crochet row, and we're going to go through the front loop only. This is a little bit tricky because the slip stitches on the last row lay kind of flat towards the front of your piece. So you have to work a bit to get your hook underneath that front loop, but it's the same thing again, just going underneath one loop, the front loop, and then doing a basic single crochet stitch through that. Here's what she's starting to look like. I was crocheting so hard, especially trying to get my hook up into the front loop, that I chipped my nail. So if you see a chipped nail throughout the rest of this, mind your business. It's hard being a material girl. When we get to the end of this row, it's time to start on the ruffle. So again, there's an option to change colors here. I do want my ruffle to be in the darker pink that I did for the middle line. So I'm cutting my yarn off, getting my darker pink back in, and pulling that through the last 2 loops of that last single crochet. From there, chain 1, turn around, and we're going to start ruffling things up. To create a ruffle, you have to increase really heavily all of a sudden, because then you end up with a bunch of fabric that will ruffle up. So what we're going to do on this first row of the ruffle is to repeat a single crochet in one stitch and then 2 single crochets in the next stitch. Here I've done a single crochet in the first stitch, and now I'm in the second stitch, making the first single crochet and then going back into the same stitch for a second one there. Then I move on to the next stitch, just 1 single crochet in this one, and then in the next one, 2 single crochets. So 1, 2, 1, 2, basic pattern back and forth, and this is going to start ruffling things up. You can see here that it's just the slightest bit, and in the next row we're going to get it even better. To end the first row of the ruffle, just chain 1, turn around, and for the second row we're going to do 2 single crochets in each stitch. Starting here, I'm going in for 1 single crochet, finishing that off and going back into the same stitch for a second one. We're going to do that in every single stitch across the row, so you are doubling your stitches, and this is what I mean by just adding a bunch of stitches all of a sudden. It'll create way bigger fabric and it will ruffle up very nicely. As you keep going, your fabric is going to get pretty wonky, start spiraling up a bit. Don't freak out, we're going to figure it out later. Might involve some blocking, but I will hold your hand through it, I promise. At the end of the ruffle here, I'm just cutting my yarn and then pulling it through. We've completed the whole headband body piece. Now we just have to add some ties to the end. So here I'm showing how all ruffled up it is. We're going to block it in place like this so that it looks nice. But before that, find your middle line where we did slip stitches. Mine is easy to see because it's a dark pink, and that's where we're going to insert our hook to make some ties. So I'm just inserting right into that line, pulling up yarn. I decided to use the same dark pink because then it just looks like one continuous line as I build the tie off of it. And we're just going to do chains off of both ends to make these ties. Just like how we did when we started the project, chains are very basic. You're just going to bring your yarn over your hook and keep pulling it through each loop on the hook until you've built up a nice long chain. We're aiming for about 18 inches or 45 centimeters. When you have reached that, just cut your yarn off, pull it through that loop, and then grab a tapestry needle to weave that end back up into the chain. If you feel like your end is secure, grab some scissors and cut right close to the chain, and that will all be hidden. We're going to do the same thing on the other side of the hairband. So find that middle line, insert your crochet hook, and we're going to build up another 18-inch chain here. If you want to avoid weaving in one end, you can hold both your working yarn and your tail end at the beginning of this chain together and just make a doubled up chain at the beginning, drop the end whenever it runs out. I know that is just one end to avoid and there are plenty of others, but I find that kind of nice. I feel cheeky when I find a way to avoid any end anywhere. Get your tapestry needle out again and do any remaining ends that you have. So I have the end of my chain here as well as the ends from each of the rows throughout the project. So I'm just weaving those into the back of their corresponding colors and then cutting them off. Now for the bad news, you have to block this project. There's just no other way to get things to lay out nicely. So I have my blocking boards here. They're actually children's play mats, which is how I got them to be so cute. And my blocking pins, you can use any pins. I just find these nice because they have multiple pins in them, so I have less pins to put in. Wet down your project and make sure it's all squeezed out. It should not be super, super wet. And then we're going to lay it down so that the base of the hairband is completely straight. I'm putting pins in, unfurling as I go and making sure that everything is laying the same way. And then once you're done, you can go back and kind of adjust the frills up a little bit so that those also dry in the way that you would like them to, whether that's even or for them to be a little wonky, but just set how you want them to dry. Once it's dry, you're done, and I hope you enjoyed this crochet tutorial. We have a bunch of other ones for you both on this YouTube channel and on materialgrrrlz.com. You can scroll through all of the free crochet patterns that we have going on, as well as read all past issues of the magazine and just explore all the fun we've got going on in Material Girl World. So I hope that you will join us there, and I'm so glad that you came to watch today. Tag Material Girls in your finished projects. Can't wait to see.